Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives, and I am here with interior designer extraordinaire Dale Saylor. He's actually been on the show one time before. I think I recapped a RHONJ filming event and
several of them.
And so you were on an episode before, so technically welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
How are you?
I'm good, Jess. How are you?
I'm good. Now, you insisted that we do this episode.
I did force you. I forced you.
You sent me a PowerPoint, a bulleted outline, and you actually won me over. At first, I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't know about this. But then when I got your outline, I was like, all right, I think there actually is something to this. There was something in the outline that really drew me in.
Was this before or after you threatened me and said, my name is attached to this? This better be good.
I did say that. We're calling this the Housewives Homes Interior Design Style Hour, Style Critique. And Dale, I mean, if you will throughout all of this, I mean, we're going to be jumping all around and going through trends, highlights from how the homes have progressed.
Lowlights.
And it's really not the homes themselves. It's more the interior design, right?
That's right. And kind of the effect they may or may not have had on storylines. And then kind of franchise by franchise, what the themes are.
And you said you're also going to provide tips, right? Like maybe how you would have done something, or just general, and give people in general interior design tips as well.
Yeah, I think because people love to hear that. I mean, there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of bad information out there. So I think whenever you can kind of speak to something, especially Bravo or Housewife related, people enjoy that.
And I guess just to give more info on you, so I actually know you set designed a project, a photo shoot for Jill Kargman.
I did.
From Odd Mom Out.
It's not what we really do because we own a design build firm and we do more traditional interior design and commercial design for homes, that sort of thing. But the Jill Kargman thing came along through a friend. And the photographer had reached out and said, we're doing this shoot with Jill, and it's to celebrate the end of wearing sweatpants and going out and getting dressed up. And Jill was going to provide all these great clothes, and she had some ideas for the sets. And so reached out to us through a friend. And so we ended up collaborating with them. And Jill was amazing, and it was super fun. And Town and Country actually picked up the article, so it ran in there with the photos. And Jill was a dream to work with.
And share the tidbit that you told me.
The photographer financed the shoot. Jill provided everything else, though. Like, Jill paid for her clothes, or obviously paid for her clothes, brought her own stuff. I mean, she showed up to the studio in Jersey City in an Uber with garment bags full of thousands and thousands of dollars in clothes and just hung out with us for the day. It was really fun, and she put in such an incredible day of work. I mean, for nothing essentially, but it was fun.
So people can find this if they just Google Town and Country Jill Kargman.
It'll come up. And it's a great article she wrote about finally we can go out and I can get dressed up, and we styled these really incredible shots with her and her goth, glamour. And one was an animated one where she was blowtorching a huge can of sweatpants piled high, and they were super comical, very Jill, very kind of dark, but in kind of these candy colored sets. So it was a fun project.
I love that.
Love Jill.
So I guess to introduce this, I think it's best said by a Jezebel article from earlier this year. And they wrote, owning a large home doesn't automatically mean it's a nice home, or tasteful for that matter. And the Housewives had built a bit of a reputation for being magnets for hideously overpriced real estate. We've rounded up several mansions that prove money can't buy you class, style, or even a decent contractor.
True. I love that Jezebel is the authority on this and the reference that we're going to start this off with. But that's true, and I think we'll probably talk about some of those mansions shortly.
I mean, do you have generally a favorite of all the homes and the style, the interiors?
I don't think I have a personal favorite. I do think some people do things better than others. And I think there are bits and pieces from several different homes or apartments that are well done. There are bones, there are bits of Bluestone Manor, Dorinda's house upstate. That's a great house. I mean, it's classical. It's got the history. It's got beautiful windows. Some of her choices are a little rough.
So maybe let's start there. Maybe let's start at Bluestone Manor.
So I think that's a great house. It was built in the early 1900s, and there was a great story about how her father, I believe, actually worked on building the house.
He was like the mason.
The stonemason, yeah. And it's got incredible stonework if you see the property and the grounds of that house. The one thing in that house that always stands out to me, two things rather, the paneled dining room, I think is incredible. I mean, that really rich, beautifully detailed wood, I mean, that's some serious money and some serious detail. I mean, someone really thought that through and put a lot into that. I think that's a really great room. And the other thing that I think is great, and this is such a weird little detail, but are the leaded windows. All of the windows are divided glass, and it's thick lead that holds them together, sort of like from old stained glass windows you see in churches. But that kind of craftsmanship and quality, I think, just jumps off the screen. Who cares that she's got all those wacky colored ottomans and drapery? But I think those kind of architectural details make that a great house. And also I think the grounds, the shrubbery, the planting, the pool, the way it's all laid out, it's a really beautiful piece of property where she is, and it's huge and wide open with vistas of the Berkshire Mountains. So there's kind of a lot to play with, and it was really, really well laid out.
Now, when I think of Bluestone Manor, I automatically think of the blue paint. Isn't it paint? Each room has a different brightly colored, or maybe richly colored paint. Are you into that?
I do like that. And I know she redid a lot of that after she had the flood. What I do love that she does is a lot of those rooms are high gloss, which was a very of the time for originally for the house, but also for now again too. I think that's always a great kind of pop to use. I mean, we have a small library in our house and it's painted a high gloss black. I think that's a great tip for people to know as well. It's a small room like that, a really kind of a great way to make it stand out is with that high gloss shine. It's also incredibly durable. You can really just wipe it off, whereas I think a lot of your matte flat finish paints can get trashed really, really easy, but that high gloss, and it's often oil paint, is super, super durable.
I love her couches. You know how she has those long purple couches in one of the great rooms, one of the living rooms? I love those.
I like those as well. I do. I think there's too much color in that room because then she's got the striped drapery that pick up the couch, and she's got some little poofs to pick up the drapery, and it's a lot of stuff going on there. But I think the bones of that room are so strong. The sofas are pretty great.
What's another one of your favorites?
So I really like Carole Radziwill's renovation to her New York apartment. I think the apartment in general is kind of not great, and I think it really goes to show you what living in New York City is like no matter how wealthy you are. It's not that big. It's got that terrifying staircase with no railing. And it's then her bedroom up there is in this little perch, I mean, it's not ideal spatially, I think, but kind of the finishes and what she did, and I forget the guy that worked on it with her. He was on the show a few times, I think. They did a great job. I mean, they added the I believe it was silver leaf on the ceiling, which is beautiful. Some of the furniture I thought was great, and I love the wallpaper that she used in the foyer. We've used it for clients before. It's a great paper, and it's got small metallic studs in it and almost makes a plaid. It's pretty masculine, but it's a pretty paper and very, very rich and luxe looking.
How do you feel about, I think it was Carole who noticed in Bluestone Manor, she'd commented to somebody saying, that the person's wealthy if they wallpaper the insides of the closets. Yes. So talk to me about wallpaper well, let's just do apartments because we live in New York City, but I guess just in general.
Wallpaper, look, it's a great material. I think you can go overboard with it, and I think you have to be careful with what you select. There's a lot of kind of cheap, bordering cheesy papers out there, but there are so many great companies, most of them are from Europe, that produce these papers that are so beautiful for things like a powder room or the inside of a closet. We're never really big fans of wallpapering an entire apartment or even really a big room. Something like that is great in small doses.
Like an accent.
Like an accent, because it is something I would say go bold. If you're going to, it's funny, a lot of companies sell solid wallpaper, which why? I don't paint the wall. It's so much cheaper and easier. If you're going to do it, really do it. And we're really a big fan of taking especially little powder rooms, just something right off your living or dining room and doing a big scale, bold paper in those kind of rooms to really make them stand out.
Peel and stick is very popular because people can just do it themselves. Do you approve of that?
If you're going to do it yourself and you're in something like a rental that you're not going to stay in very long, then sure. I think it can be tricky installing them sometimes. Some of them that I've seen, they can get a lot of bubbles. Matching the seams up is tricky. A good paper installer is expensive, and there's a reason why. To really get all the seams to align properly, get it trimmed properly. You know, there's a lot that can go wrong. I think the peel and stick gives you several opportunities to try, which is great and sort of elevates the DIY quality of it all. But I think there's nothing really that can compare to a good, true paper installer.
Just to give people a glimpse at our outline here, you're going to be talking about people's closets, different housewives' closets.
This is an 8-hour episode.
A deep dive into all of Bethenny's homes, going from like her season 1 kitchen all the way through to the one that's on the market now, the Hall of Fame and the Hall of Shame. And then you've got trends. There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot. I would say a third good thing, and this is very new to us all now because it just came back, is Heather Dubrow's Orange County house. We saw it being built, and I don't know if you follow along with the YouTube videos. She kind of did progress of it over the years. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of house, and it's a lot, but I do think it's pretty well done. I think it's a little bit cold. It kind of harkens to a hotel in some areas because it's very styled. You know, it'd be nice to see some books out or some magazines out or even a toy on the floor or something to show that she lives there, you know, because I think they shoot all that B-roll before that season starts so that they can flash to like her great room, her dining room, her closet, you know, so it's all styled for that reason. It's not like shot as they go, so it looks really perfect. But I think it's a pretty house. I think she introduced everyone on Bravo to the word porte cochere. Which is a real thing, and it's beautifully done. You know, I don't know that it screams Southern California, but it's really pretty and it's well done. And I actually love the window etching she did with the tree that represents all the kids.
Yeah.
When you look kind of out over that, I think it's from the foyer into maybe like a central garden or something. But I do think it's a pretty house.
Trends, or I mean, you were really talking about like New York trends, or just like trends across franchises.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because these women all sort of find each other. You know, something may start out one way, and then as it evolves, they all kind of tend to evolve with it. And I think one thing with New York, not only did most of them divorce in some way, their homes changed as well. When you think about season 1 Ramona in that classic 6 uptown, very frumpy, very fancy, lots of, you know, valances and drapery and throw pillows. Luann's townhouse, even though it was very skinny, you know, the townhouse, same thing. It was an uptown townhouse. They owned these properties, you know, and they had...
Luann rented that townhouse?
The
Count never owned. No, they owned in the Hamptons. That was a rental.
I did not know that. Was that a rental just for filming, do you think?
No, I think it was
so they actually
home.
were living there. That's
She's
good to
never
know.
owned in the city.
That's really interesting. I assume they always owned that. Mm-mm. But what I thought was funny then, and I'll pull her out of this, similar to Dorinda when she had her little jewel box apartment there that I tried to sell. You know, these women
tried to sell it?
She tried to sell.
I thought you said you tried to sell it.
No, she tried to sell. Then they evolved into these rentals. And like when Sonja leased out the mansion, here she is in this like white box rental in Columbus Circle. Ramona, here she's renting this white box apartment somewhere in Midtown East. Dorinda was renting her white box apartment that rumor was she got for free because she had a deal to film there.
Totally.
It just seems funny that like they all kind of start out in this substantial real estate, and as you know, whether the show evolves, their lives evolve, they all sort of morph into these kind of characterless apartments. Very similar in style. I couldn't tell one from the other. I think Luann is now somewhere maybe on the Upper West Side, but same kind of apartment, completely like style free, devoid of character, you know, and it's some new modern building that they all sort of flock to.
But that's a function of the interior design, not owning or renting.
Yes, definitely. But I think it's very funny that they all sort of have ended up in basically the same apartment. You know, when they started out very differently, you know, and they started out as very different people as well. But I think it's interesting that they're all in this like interchangeable white apartment.
Do you remember remember that episode where Jill Zarin like renovated her kitchen? She renovated a bunch of her apartments.
I used to be a traditional girl, and now I'm a mid-century girl.
Yes. And she says to Bethenny, so like, what do you think? And Bethenny says, you don't want, like, don't ask me what I think.
And that was a good response because it was rough before and it was rough after. Yeah, I didn't love what Jill was doing in that building. Again, kind of a character. I mean, they owned that, but a characterless building by the Queensboro Bridge. I mean, it wasn't like
Jay-Z owns in that building.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least he did.
It didn't have a lot going on as far as character, and I think they added all that molding when Traditional Home came and shot it back in season maybe 1 or 2. And then when her friend Brad helped her and added all that kind of teal and like watery blue and those weird silver pop tables, it was forcing a square peg in a round hole that didn't make a lot of sense. I wasn't a big fan of either of that. I did like Kelly Ben-Simone's apartment though. She was down in the police building and we were talking about the big horse. It was kind of fun and it was very her. Again, I think it speaks to no matter how much money you have in New York City, she was still sleeping in a little lofted bedroom without a proper closet, because remember, all her handbags,
yes,
as Jill said, were on display like jewelry, because they are.
You know, I've been following Jill Zarin's Instagram as I am wont to do, and she just moved into Ramona's building.
Ramona's current rental building?
Yes.
I think I might know that. I think I saw that.
She literally, I don't know why Jill, I don't know what's going on with Jill. Like why I feel like she moved like 3 times in the past year, but.
Interesting. And they don't have the Hamptons house. I think she sold that.
They're in the process of renovating a new one.
Okay.
In Sag Harbor.
Okay. Next franchise?
Okay, so let's talk about, you have some points here about closets. You said that they seem to play a part in all franchises.
They're always talking about their closet. And when you first meet most of these housewives, a big part of meeting them is them showing off their closet. And some of them shouldn't be shown off. It's funny. I think they really feel like they're keeping up by showing their clothes. But to me, it's like we're looking at a closet that sometimes isn't good.
What makes a closet good?
Well, first, I mean, the functionality is important. But to me, if you're going to be on television, standing and showing off a closet, it also needs to look pretty good. Thinking about like Lisa Vanderpump's closet, which looks great. It's merchandise. It's set up like a store. It's color coded. Clothes are behind glass. Jewelry's got a home. Lingerie has a home. Everything like lives in a place. And then you see Jen Shaw's closet on Salt Lake City, both Chalet 1 and current Chalet. There's a shot, and I was trying to find this for you. I couldn't find it anywhere online, where they must have installed some cheap plywood shelves for something in that closet, and then realized after the fact that when you walked in the closet, you were hitting the edge of those shelves. So they sawed all the angles off at 45-degree angles, and it's the first thing you see whenever they enter her closet is like the sides of plywood shelves. And this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. It's awful.
A bad build out.
And then those Calyx shelves from Ikea. That's what everything else is sitting on Ikea shelves. And it's like, I know you have expensive shoes. I know you've got expensive bags. I know you've got a lot going on in your personal life, but it's just thrown in there. And maybe it's for like, moving in the middle of the night or something to keep things portable, but it really looks rough. And Cynthia Bailey is also guilty of that in Atlanta. Yeah. She has those same Ikea shelves in her, it was a bedroom that she turned into a closet.
What do you think of Dr. Tiffany Moon's digitally locked door?
So let's talk about this, because Mary from DC, to really throw you back, also had the same thing to lock her daughter out of her closet. And I think at the time people were like, whoa, wow, keypad. You can buy those keypads for $100 at Lowe's and put them on any door in your house. It's not a fancy thing to have at all. And 9 times out of 10, they don't even work. And I do think there were some shots of Tiffany not being able to get into her own closet as well. It seems like this statusy thing. And again, think beyond, what you're showing on television. It makes no sense. And for Tiffany, I have no idea why they were locked. I guess just for the value of the clothes. But if you can't get into your own closet, that's a big problem.
Also, as far as times when the interiors are part of the story, Karen's first Potomac kitchen, the white kitchen.
So she defended this kitchen on Watch What Happens Live. A caller called in and shaded her over it, and she said, "I love that kitchen. In fact, I have 2." Because I guess she had some sort of basement kitchen or like a ensuite apartment or something that also had a kitchen. That kitchen was awful. And in general, Potomac homes are rough. And it's one of my favorite franchises. I think they're great. I think they bring so much story to the television.
They're natural comedians.
And none of it is taken too seriously. It's not like in some of the Jersey storylines where you're a little afraid for your life. It's like it's so lighthearted, and they throw the shade so well at each other and kind of kiss and make up and then go right back at it again. They can't decorate a home if their lives depended on it. None of them. And the biggest offender is, of course, Gizelle.
But what is this? Don't they hire interior designers?
I don't think so. I think with them, they came out so quickly out of the gate. I think they were probably not making any money the first couple seasons. They just had what they had. They tried to style it up and just couldn't. I mean, what Giselle is putting into that house to renovate it.
Go deep on Giselle.
I love her. I love her so much, but she can't dress and she can't decorate a home. The purple walls in that house with the funny oversized furniture and hot pink. I mean, it looks like some weird boutique hotel. It's unfortunate. And then she's building a west wing onto it now with a glam room and a master bedroom suite. And when you look at the shot of that from the outside, none of it makes any sense. I read someone online who described that house as Giselle's strap-on house because it looks like she strapped that west wing onto the side of this long, low ranch, which was sort of a cute house to start with. And she's screwed the whole thing up now. It's just, and talking about she's doing more to it, and just stop.
You know, when people put extensions onto their homes, what is the best? I know that they're like often problematic. What is the best way to tackle a project like that?
I think when you do something like that, the first thing you have to do is step back and see, how is this going to look from across the street? How is this going to look from all four sides? What's the approach to the house going to become? Sometimes people, I think, stick the extension on where they have property without really thinking about what's best for the house. Oftentimes, I think those extensions look best off to the back, so you don't see them from the front. And if you can't make it architecturally make sense with the roof lines, with the siding, or whatever the exterior of the house is, I think it's often better and more interesting if you make it something completely different. There are some beautiful homes out there where they're very traditional, they're colonial, they're federal, and they've done sort of a modern, like almost glass box sort of terrarium edition, which is much more interesting and much safer in the end than trying to match something 200 years old.
As you were talking, I was thinking about all the different players that go into a renovation. Can you quickly give a broad explanation? Basically, the players that you need are an architect, contractor, and an interior designer. Can you kind of go into the crucial points that each of these players have? And
those roles can flex a lot. You need an architect. Typically, you need an architect for anything you're building. If you're doing interior renovation work, you might not need an architect. An interior designer could do that themselves, which is a lot of the work that we do. It's great if your architect and interior designer have worked together, know each other, and communicate together. Bethenny got into this, I know, with the Gomez sisters and Bethany Ever After. Mm-hmm. They weren't talking to the architect, and decisions were getting made and they weren't getting transferred. The architect is the keeper of all the information. They're producing the drawings. They're having the drawing stamped with the city. They're the ones who are really driving the boat. So anything made with the decorator, the designer, and the client needs to be thoroughly communicated all the time to the architect. And I like also when the architect and the designer speak a lot, the rooms are designed to really function and hold furniture. If an architect works alone in isolation and their only program note is a client saying, I want a 10 by 10 dining room. And then you get in there and you realize you can't fit a table for 8 in a 10 by 10 dining room. You know, if you think about it almost from the inside out, it's much more of a successful partnership.
And then get into the role of a contractor.
So the contractor, again, if the contractor and the architect have a relationship, that's often great. We see often things like that get into trouble is when a client steps in and says, oh, I have a friend. Oh, I know somebody, but they have no relationship with anybody else in the team. That can get really tricky, and they think they're saving money by X, Y, and Z. And in the end, you spend so much time fixing mistakes, you've saved no money, and you have a crappy project in the end. So if you keep that really, strong communication open between everybody, there are a lot of people under the contractor. You're going to have plumbers and electricians and all the various subs. So there, in the end, are a lot of players. So a strong general contractor to manage that is really important.
And then quickly go into the role of truly an interior designer.
So an interior designer, what we do in our studio is a little beyond just traditional interior design because we do a lot of full renovation work and kitchen renovation. But you can also just be an interior decorator, which is really much more based in the world of furniture, fabrics, accessories, decorative lighting, all that sort of world of kind of how to fill out a room. A designer tends to get a little more involved with the architect, manipulates the space, thinks more about finishes, a little more three-dimensionally. But there are often projects where you have a decorator, a designer, and an architect. You can get, these layers can get quite deep for big projects.
We've got a goddamn pro over here.
For better or worse.
I love it. And then, so you have a point here about Sheree's baseboards.
Yeah, the year that she came back, and I believe it's the year she came back as a friend. I don't think it's when she came back full time. Chateau Sheree had been a plot point for years that she was building this huge mansion. So years and years, we're hearing about the chateau, hearing about it. Finally, we're let inside for a party, and there was an entire moment between Kenya Moore and Sheree discussing the fact that there were no baseboards in some of the rooms. And Kenya was shading her because she had also renovated her house, which I think is near Sheree's. But at least she had baseboards. And Sheree couldn't understand why that mattered at all because she'd built this entire house from the ground up. And who the hell cares if some rooms are missing baseboards? Again, I think it's like the closet thing. If you're going to invite cameras in and especially pretend to be so fabulous with such an incredible home, you better have baseboards.
I can't even imagine that.
Finish the room,
That's
finish off the room.
crazy.
It's like, again, it's a tiny thing, but if you're going to pretend to do this, go in full force, finish
So the
project.
walls just went down to the ground, like the
And
the
we're just
paint.
unfinished. So it was just unfinished drywall at the floor. No, yeah.
There's no other home that's been a bigger part of the storyline than Sonja's townhouse.
Number one.
Number one, right?
When we were first talking about doing this episode, I had this outline of all these like bits and pieces that I thought we should talk about. And then I'm like, the motherfucking townhouse. That's the number one thing.
When you're in there, it feels like you're in another country, in another time period.
Yes. Kelly Ben-Simone at one point early on had said, it smells in there. And it looks like it would smell in there. And I think she said, and it really needs to be updated. The red carpet in some of those rooms. I mean, it's an era gone by. It's a relic from the 80s. And I think she did some refreshing to it, I think, to put it on the market, cleaned up some of the rooms. And she talked about it a little bit on the show. I think that house probably needs major internal repairs. It looks like, she's had water leak problems.
Oh, yeah.
She's talked about, I think, the windows leaking before. I think there's a lot going on in that house, and it just hasn't been well maintained over the years.
It's either a 4 or 5 story townhouse with an elevator. Like this is
That usually doesn't work.
Yeah, what's your thought on elevators?
So, not a huge fan unless you really have the space or need to warrant it if you're a client who would need it. That townhouse is not that large. It's only like a double wide New York City townhouse. It's not one of these massive with upper East Side, homes that you see. By the way, I've heard before people say really in a snobby way that her townhouse is on the wrong side of Lexington Avenue.
On the wrong side of Lexington. Oh,
Uptown.
Well,
She's east of Lexington, and you don't want to be east of
she's
Lexington.
between Lexington and 3rd.
That's right. You want to be on the other side between Lexington. That's right.
So I used to pass the townhouse every single day.
To use the parking garage?
No.
Conveniently located right next door.
No, because I used to work on the Upper East Side, and so I would take the F train to 63rd and Lex, and literally that's where
That's where
lives.
Tony lives. We shouldn't say that probably, but
Everybody knows.
okay. And again, I think it could be great. I think spatially it's challenging because those rooms are small, and you can tell even on camera when they're all jammed in that kitchen, it's not very wide. There's a lot shoved in that kitchen. There's a lot shoved in her master suite. They're very small rooms, and I think the problem with a lot of dated furniture that she's got, it's big. It's really big furniture, big canopy beds, huge big sofas. It doesn't make any sense with how much space you have realistically in a home like that.
What's your thought on big furniture?
So 2 schools of thought on that. One, if you have the space and you're in an area where you have land and a home to support that, go for it. The Dubrows have a lot of big furniture because that's a big ass house with a lot of land.
I'm talking about like a New York City apartment.
If you're in a typical home or typical apartment, a piece of big furniture can actually be kind of great. You have to be careful about what it is and how you use it. Like, for instance, I think sometimes a big dining table can actually look really great in a room. You want to then think about the chairs being a little more smaller scale. If you're in a small apartment and you have a big table, it can be great for entertaining, be great for work. You can, really use that table for multiple functions. But then think about what's going around it. You don't want a massive break front also in that room. Let one piece be your statement piece.
Remember when Luann was living in the townhouse?
Grey Gardens too.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was
the two of them
amazing.
together. That was comedy gold right there.
I loved when they had, during that season, I think that was season 8. Yeah, it was right before she met Tom. She moved out because she moved in with Tom.
And then Tinsley moved in.
Yes. Oh my God.
It was a Hotel Morgan.
Wow. Oh my God. I remember that season when they would be on Watch What Happens Live. They used to have like a Grey Gardens little like intro music, and they thought it was hilarious. It was like, this is not a compliment.
It wasn't super complimentary, no, but it was good TV.
Any final thoughts about the townhouse? Or is it too big of a project for you to take on?
The townhouse is a huge project. It really is. And like I said, I think spatially there are some big challenges, but I would love to go in there and just really overhaul it and really look at the plan of every single floor and make a proper entrance so people aren't waiting outside. I mean, it's weird to me that you kind of fall into that front door and you're just in the house. There's no sense of arrival. There's no sort of like moment to kind of decompress off the street. It's a really challenging home. And you do kind of wonder when you hear, oh, it's not on the best block. And, the Morgans, you'd think, would have bought the very best and the best location. Was it just lack of availability? Did they love it for some other reason? Who really knows? I think it really just a full overhaul would be a great thing for that townhouse. I would love for somebody to buy it eventually and do that.
Why do you think she won't lower the price just to get rid of it? Because she says it costs her $50,000 a month.
That's believable.
Upkeep.
Totally believable. Yeah, I don't know. She seems really attached to it, and I do wonder. Sonja, I do think sometimes lives in the past. Partying with JFK and Madonna. I mean, she brings out these references that make no sense. Of dead people, and it's she's an odd bird in that way, and I think she is a little bit trapped in a time when she was like at her peak. Her clothes often, I think, reference that too. They feel dated. I think that townhouse represents that to her, not to psychoanalyze her too much here.
And the final note on this, when interiors were part of the story, Carole's sofa with the fabric from Lee Radswell.
That was a big one, right? I mean, everyone talked. And I think she knew like fans and people were talking about it because then it kind of got brought in, when she did the whole renovation. That Schumacher fabric, which is still available, that became a thing because that was Lee's sofa. And I think her cats destroyed it. You just saw it like threadbare, from claws and also from years and years of use. It's great that she kept it. I don't love the fabric. I think they picked a blue mohair or a blue velvet to recover it. It didn't have much personality. I mean, I thought it would have been great if they recovered it in the same fabric, like just to kind of kept the history of it.
Let's now do a deep dive into Bethenny.
Lots to say about Bethenny.
I'm obsessed with this.
Season 1, I mean, her teeny little one-bedroom rental.
Typical.
Again,
that's where people live.
That's
with
where
the
people
little
live.
balcony. That is very typical.
The assistant at the coffee or the kitchen table. I mean, the bedroom right off the entry. You could tell they could barely fit a camera crew in there to even film that.
Relatable queen.
Relatable. Very relatable. I think the evolution of her that got interesting is when she got her spin-off and they moved downtown to Renwick Street and also in a rental. But they always keep saying Bethenny's condo, and it's like, it could be a condo building, but she's renting it. And I don't know if production rented that for her, and that was sort of the impetus for her moving downtown. That apartment was interesting because then she moved Skinny Girl Business into the apartment, which was a whole crazy layer of chaos, and having a baby and a husband there.
Totally.
Interesting fun fact, though. I was re-watching Bethany Ever After recently, as one does. Behind her sofa in that apartment sits the golden apple from the opening credits of Real Housewives of New York. It was sitting on a console table right behind her in 90% of the shots in their living room.
So she must do this in every single one of her homes, at least when she was on the show, because in her 22 Mercer apartment, which was the apartment she was in once she was no longer quote unquote homeless in season 7, and she bought that new apartment, and she was in for like a good 5 years. That's actually my favorite apartment of hers, the one that eventually Frederick sold.
Right.
She had the golden apple.
Was it on a coffee table?
No, it's actually how do I explain this? There's a courtyard that if you looked at, anybody in that apartment building can just like look down into this shared little courtyard area. And she put the apple out there because she was only on the second floor. I can't reveal how I know this, but I think you may know.
I know how you know it. It's okay. Please don't tell the listeners.
Okay.
So the apple lived outside.
The apple lived outside.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That apartment, I think, had a lot of problems. And that's another case of no matter how much money you
22
have.
Mercer?
22 Mercer.
Oh, okay.
No matter how much money you have in New York City, Bethenny freaking Frankel, you walk in the front door, that master bedroom suite is right there and had those 2 super high windows.
Like basement windows.
Basement windows, which they weren't in the basement. And they had to disguise them with really long drapery behind her bed. And it was like, even you are having to like trick the eye in an apartment like this because there are always flaws in spaces that you just can't get around.
There is no perfect apartment.
Doesn't
Even
exist.
if you have all the money in the world, unless you're building something from scratch. Like
Right.
if you're building a home.
The Dubrows, for them, is probably a perfect home.
But with New York City,
not possible.
The issue with New York City is that You're always kind of like working with something that exists.
You're always constrained.
And you can't knock down every wall. Like things are structural.
Things are structural, and then you reach a limit. No matter how nice your home is in New York City, it's still an apartment. Whether it's a studio or Bethenny Frankel or whoever, it's still an apartment in a building with other people. You know, it's only going to get so nice.
Okay, so to this point, I think I would rather live in an apartment than a house. It makes me feel safe to like know that other people are around. Maybe it's because I've lived in an apartment for so long. I've only lived in one house, the house I grew up in, my parents' house.
It's all on you.
It's all on you. So much work to upkeep a house.
It's a lot of work.
I see friends who in the pandemic left the city and bought homes, in Beacon or, somewhere in the Hudson Valley. And it is just so much work.
And then there's the outside. You're not shoveling a sidewalk typically in New York City yourself. Suddenly you have to get somebody to plow out the driveway, to shovel the sidewalks, to keep the house painted, to mow the lawn, to, weed the garden in the summer. We are working at the house all the time. There's never not a project going. It's impossible.
Back to Bethenny.
Lots about Bethenny.
Okay, so let's talk more about that apartment.
Yeah,
so we're talking about the Bethenny Ever After.
The Bethenny Ever After apartment. That's really when we saw her jump, because there was nothing in that apartment that was special. The furniture looked like from room and board. Everything was relatively character-free. It was just functional crap jammed in an apartment.
Jason Hoppy on the couch being passive-aggressive.
It was just an apartment that functioned. The fact that she was running a business out of that, I think, is incredible. When she jumped then to Hudson, the Jason Hoppy loft, that was when we finally were like, okay, she's making money. This is the one where she had the Gomez sisters working with her. She really was like putting effort into it. You were seeing her style come out. I think her clothes even got better. I mean, she really obviously was in a different financial situation.
Because this is when she sold Skinny Girl.
That's right. Yeah, because she's renovating that apartment on Hudson Street during Bethenny Ever After. Mm-hmm. They had design meetings during that. They were talking about picking out toilets, and they went to ABC Stone to pick slabs for the kitchen.
The contractor, I cannot remember his name, but that contractor has a show, or he used to in the day that I actually used to watch. It was sort of like $1 Million Contractor. I'm like making that up, but it was like that. And she literally pulls all of her people, down to Frederick, and now she fired Ryan Serhant from selling her latest apartment, but it's like she just like watches TV and picks. I'm like, oh, that person looks good, rather than somebody in the real world. Like, just because somebody's on TV
doesn't make them good.
That means that they're like a media personality. That means It doesn't mean that they're like the best person for the job. It's just funny to me.
And I'm sure in a way she's casting a show too. She's thinking, in case it gets filmed for X, or in case I sell this pilot or this show, there's a reason this person's gonna become on TV. But I think the one thing that sticks out about that apartment was the man cave. Do you remember this storyline where they had this chunk of space and it was either going to become an expansive closet for her or Jason's man cave?
Yes.
And they got the closet.
Yeah.
Again, the interiors were running the storyline for a while, because I remember so clearly that design meeting they had on site pre-renovation discussing what to do with that space.
I didn't even like the finished product.
That apartment wasn't great, but it definitely elevated, I think, where she had always been on television, which then led into 22 Mercer, which was a good apartment, but like I said, the window thing bothered me. I think spatially it was a little strange. It was a gigantic living space. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like any of the bedrooms, Bryn's room, were that big. It felt a little out of scale, and that could have been just the television part of it too. But then that led into the big mother apartment that she's currently selling.
I can't believe she's selling this apartment. This is again in Soho. It's on Broadway, but it's also on Crosby.
Yeah.
Like, it has two
goes
addresses.
All the way through, yeah.
I was so disappointed with how this turned out. I didn't like the black pillars, and I also felt like 22 Mercer really had personality. Like, I loved the Skinny Girl red couch. You walk in and it's a really long hallway, and there's that couch that lines it. You would see that all the time whenever the Housewives would enter.
Right.
And I really felt like there was a lot of personality going on in that apartment. I felt like the new one, the mothership one, was just like devoid of personality.
It was really like a hotel.
And really dark too.
Yeah, it was dark. The choices of the black columns, black radiators, black pipes, and in doing my research for this show, there was a little bit of talk about that, and basically any exposed sort of services like that, they painted them all black, which I thought was a very strange choice, because it's typically the opposite. You would want that stuff to disappear. but there was really very little personality. I mean, I remember when she was on the show and they were sort of wrapping up the renovation, there were so many Restoration Hardware boxes. It doesn't surprise me the apartment looks that way. It looks like a Restoration Hardware showroom in a lot of ways. It was just the same sort of lighting fixtures and sofas and rugs over and over and over again. And do you remember the giant glam room she built in there?
Yeah.
It was like a full salon with no personality. And you're right, it was really dark. There was I don't know if maybe it's a dark apartment, but lighting seemed challenging in there.
I can't believe she's selling it. I remember she bought it maybe for like $4 million. It's now on the market for 7 or 7.5. Maybe it's just like, okay, this was maybe an investment property, but I thought she talked about how like this is going to be my home forever. So she's just not going to have an apartment in the city. Like why?
Well, I think she has a place in Boston now, so she's spending a lot of time up there.
And Greenwich.
And she's done several, I believe 3 flip properties in Greenwich, which she's renovated and either flipped or is in the process of flipping, which I thought was an interesting business for her because that Frederick show didn't seem to do well.
Yeah.
But I think that might have been not about the property. That might have been about casting.
Did you by any chance watch, this is a little bit going on a tangent, but if we follow through with this, it'll tie back to The Big Shot with Bethenny. Did you watch Jenna Lyons' show?
Stylish? Yes,
Stylish.
of course.
Okay, perfect. Oh, good. Because I've never talked about this. So I actually just went to see Jenna Lyons interviewed for 2 friends of mine host a podcast. They did a live podcast taping with Jenna Lyons. And so to prepare for that, I binged all of Stylish and I loved it. And what was most striking to me was, okay, Stylish and The Big Shot with Bethenny, both HBO Max projects, both sort of competition shows based on like a media personality. This is what happens when you have a producer is Stylish.
Right.
When you don't have a producer, or I mean, Bethenny just run amok, you have The Big Shot with Bethenny.
Agreed.
Because those shows have a lot in common.
They're both super glossy, HBO Max. And I think at their base, they both had style, but I think one was just really a mess. The one thing I didn't love about Stylish was sometimes I was confused if I was watching a competition show or like a home makeover show. Like they kind of hit a lot of targets and it felt a little frantic at points, but I enjoyed it. And I definitely thought it was better put together than The Big Shot with Bethenny show.
Yeah. If anybody's just like looking for something to binge, like I recommend Stylish.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly you guys have maybe, most likely seen Big Shot, and it's just fun to compare the two.
They're very different, but very the same. Can we talk about our Hamptons house really quick?
Ooh, please.
So just to go out east for a second, the red door kind of bothers me. I mean, I know it's her thing. That house had 0 personality inside. Do you remember
I love that house.
Do you remember when Barbara Kay was walking through and just kept like talking about the moldings and kept like manhandling all the molding in the house? And I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever to talk about. But then I'm watching it realizing that was the best part of the house.
I disagree.
I did not love that house.
I disagree with you. I love the chairs. Those like, I don't know what the word is.
It's the rattan chair, the woven chairs. Yeah.
I would live in that house. That's my dream. Like the farmhouse. I disagree.
But also I think she had really talked up her New York apartment so much and we'd seen such an evolution. I was just picturing a lot more layers and a lot more going on with it. It felt a little like an Airbnb to me, like it was a little temporary. And
I've mentioned this before and I'll say it again. Nothing is better than when the Beverly Hills housewives go to the Hamptons. They go. You will see Erica Jane enter that house, and then later that night, Bethenny hosts them for dinner, and Lisa Rinna has to leave because she gets the shits. But that's maybe like my favorite episode of.
That was a good crossover, and that's when we first met Erica. Really,
yeah,
that was right at the beginning.
It's literally like her first episode.
Yeah, is that the first episode?
It may be her first. Maybe.
Because I remember them trying to describe Erica to Bethenny and showing her a clip of Painkiller on her phone and her being like, I think Bethenny said, wow, there's a lot going on there. And that's how she described Erica.
Fun fact for you, when Bethenny left Housewives, she painted the door white.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
She still has that house though, I believe. Yeah.
The gates on her house were also painted Skinny Girl red, and they're now white.
We never saw that on camera though, I don't think, the gates.
Maybe not. It's just because whenever I'm out there, I drive by.
And that's in Bridgehampton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally around the corner from Topping Rose.
Which is where they always film.
Yeah.
They're the only place that'll let them film dinner scenes.
Almonds and Topping Rose, they're both like right around the corner.
But you know what I actually do like out there is Luann's Sag Harbor house. I think that's a really charming home. I love that it's on the water. It's not fussy. It looks like people actually live there, but also took some thought in putting it together. Stuff is not junky, but stuff is also not precious. And I think she hit a nice note with that. It looks like a really charming house.
Speaking of Luann, her latest apartment on the Upper West Side is one of those rentals. After this season of New York, they did one of those episodes, it was kind of like the Real World, like the shit you didn't see. It was like one of those. I think a lot of people didn't even watch this.
I didn't watch it.
Okay, so in one part, she's literally giving a tour of her apartment, and she goes to show the bathroom, and all of these sound mixers are in the bathroom. She's like, oh, we can't show that. So it sort of showed there's so many people in these apartments.
You have to wonder
when you're filming, and they're hiding in bathrooms.
Think back to season 1 Bethenny in that small apartment, how they put that together and the lighting required for it, and yes, just the bodies.
Oh, that's the other thing. Okay, thank you for bringing up the lighting. They also need to light the entire apartment or the home, whatever homes they're in. Remember in the Berkshires when Ramona quote unquote ripped down the lighting because they were so wasted?
Yes.
Those were production lights.
Right.
So they have to light whatever it is. It's a whole thing.
And especially a big old house like that, which probably doesn't have a lot of light to start with. I mean, they're lighting them like roving TV sets. It's definitely a huge production. I can't imagine how invasive that is for your home to have lights screwed to the ceiling. And I mean, it's a giant amount of work.
Are you aware that Forbes is calling the new award-winning skincare brand Proven Skincare the Tesla of skincare, where beauty meets technology? Here's what. Proven Skincare creates personalized skincare based on over 47 factors about a person's skin, genetic background, lifestyle, and environment. All you do is go to their site, provenskincare.com, and take the free skin genome quiz. It asks you questions like, what are your main skin concerns? Dark circles, redness, dryness, how your skin tends to appear in photos, your genetic background, lifestyle, all to get a personalized skincare routine that is specifically suited for you, and it replaces a full shelf of products, including a personalized cleanser, day moisturizer with SPF, and personalized night cream. Just go to provenskincare.com to take the free skin genome quiz and use code HOTTAKES at checkout for $20 off your first order, plus free shipping. That's provenskincare.com, code HOTTAKES for $20 off your first order. PROVEN skincare.com, code HOTTAKES. Let's talk about Jersey. I think Jersey's the biggest offender because these are huge homes, but they're all kind of haunted.
Much like with the trends with New York and, Beverly Hills, having I think Beverly Hills has a lot of outdoor space. All these sort of franchises have their thing. There is a Jersey look to these homes that is singular. It's a lot of fake stone, a lot of fake marble, a lot of fake onyx, because they're not real. They're porcelain for the most part. There are a lot of large sweeping staircases. There are a lot of giant kitchens with really badly detailed cabinetry with lots of fluting and OG edges and detailing on them. And they're all very similar, except for who I think has the nicest home in Jersey, but she's really screwed it up, is Margaret. She's got that Tudor house that I think is really beautiful, and it looks like it's kind of set back, and it's got some woods around it or a lot of nice trees. It doesn't feel like you're landing from nowhere like Jennifer Aden's house and Teresa's house and Melissa's house. There's something about Margaret's that feels very kind of nestled, and it has a lot of personality. What she's done to the inside of that house makes my eyes bleed. It's really unfortunate. All that bright color, all that Missoni fabric. It's too bad because that could have been a really stunning, sophisticated home.
Talk to me about Teresa and Melissa's houses.
Well, they're, I think, relatively interchangeable. There's sort of this there's a phrase called builder grade, and basically what it means is when your builder makes decisions on materials, and it's done a lot in spec houses. Basically, it's the cheapest they can get to look the best, and I feel like those two homes are both highly guilty of that. And Joe Gorga works in the construction industry, or did at the time, and Joe Giudice did as well. They're cutting every corner to kind of get the look they want to with the minimal cost, and I think they both reek of that. I always think with Teresa's house, the biggest offender, and I'll pitch it early, those door handles. Those giant angel wing door handles, I think, are one of the most offensive things on TV. Because why? Why? And that they likely spent some money on because those were probably cast metal. They're not something they bought at a Lowe's or a builder supply store. Those were made for that.
Why does she have these like windows that are like all the way up high? Like nobody can even get to that level of the home, but there's like a little window.
Is that at the little turret part in the corner? I think, she always talked about this, which I think was funny because it's not what she meant. She kept saying French chateau, French chateau. I'm building my house to look like a French chateau. There's nothing about that house. It's like a French chateau. What I think that is more of like kind of a castle, like almost an English castle reference in some strange way. And in the middle of Jersey, is this strange sort of pseudo stucco castle that really makes no sense there. And I think that's what those windows are trying to reference.
Jennifer Aydin's house.
Well, it's big. And I don't know if you can see this. I noticed this when she first was on the show. It's on a really narrow lot. Like there's another house, like bam, right out of the shot next to her. And they try to crop that out, but you can tell when they do some of the exterior zoom ins that she's got a side yard of like 8 feet on either side of that giant Paramus house. Again, I think it's just a lot of this like really bad furniture that she bragged about going to China to source when you can buy that, in a lot of really terrible online stores. I thought it was very interesting last season or possibly the season before when she had a company come in, I think Z Gallery, and restaged the entire front entry. And it was such an obvious moment of product placement and look, I'm getting free furniture. But they redesigned it, and it did help a little bit because I think her biggest problem was there was nothing in the space.
Let's talk about Beverly Hills, because these are truly the most magnificent homes.
They really are.
I want to get your opinion on Lisa Vanderpump's homes, like the first house and then Villa Rosa, Kyle Richards' journey with homes, and also Yolanda's house in Malibu with the glass refrigerator.
Yes, and the lemon trees.
Look,
these women were really rich, and I think they positioned the show like that from the very beginning. So the homes in Beverly Hills always played a really big part. They were like a character. Lisa's homes are spectacular for what they are. I think they look pretty cheap from the inside, like a lot of kind of cheap furniture with cheap fabric. It's sort of the look of Sir as well. Like it's sort of this bohemian anthropology with a lot of mirror. And that's really hard to translate. I mean, stuff is not vintage in her house. It was all very new. I think it's a spectacular house, both the first one and this one. But one thing I really love about both the homes is the indoor-outdoor quality. That you walk in that front door, whether it's got a moat or not, which it does, and you're instantly inside, but then you look straight ahead and you have that vista out over the hills behind, which I think is really incredible. Like that's priceless, to have that.
And what about Kyle Richards' homes?
Kyle is interesting. So Faye, another friend of, is her decorator who's done all those homes. Kyle's interesting because you can tell she sort of stepped it up. Like where she was before in the house that Sutton rented last season really felt like a California ranch. It didn't have a lot of presence. It was pretty, but it didn't say wow, and obviously Mauricio wasn't making the money then that he is now. And then they moved to this house, which is an early 19th century, very old Hollywood home and is really beautiful. I mean, I think it's a great house with beautiful gardens and grounds. And it's like, I think she really wanted the wow house. What I can't stand about that house is that bright pink neon wall sculpture in the entry that casts every shot in sort of this sickly Pepto-Bismol color that I don't know why production wouldn't just turn that off when they're filming, because it really ruins every shot of the interior of her house because it's always kind of hovering in the background because it's so bright. You see it no matter what. But I like her. I do like her house. I think Faye's done a nice job. It's very California. It's very muted. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't think it's got a ton of personality, but they're nicely done homes.
Did the Girardi, what is worse, the Girardi Pasadena mansion or Lisa Rinna's kitchen? Like, I don't know why Rinna won't renovate that house.
All right. Full disclosure, I love Lisa Rinna, and I'm probably alone on this, but I actually don't mind that house. I think people live there. And I think she's not pretending.
But it feels to me like it's from the 90s.
Oh, it is. Totally right. It's totally dated. I mean, I think that show was when Lisa Met Harry, that reality show they did for a while years ago that only I watched. they were in that house. I think she's been there forever. But there's almost like kind of like a frugality about it. It's like, sure, I've got the money. I don't need to spend it. I'm going to keep vintage clothes in the garage because I can. There's something about that I really do respect. And I actually think it's a pretty property. I think the outside is really beautiful, the views that they have. The house is musty and dusty, and that office makes me cringe with all that stuff coming off the shelves at you. The Girardis, that house I just didn't understand. It was so obviously the first wife's house. It's weird to me to have all this incredibly like classical furniture in these wood paneled rooms and, really sort of a wealthy California, mission style Spanish home. And there's a naked painting of Erica over the fireplace. There were like these shots of her that made zero sense with the house because it was obvious she really had nothing to do with it from a style point of view.
I guess it's fine. I mean, any final thoughts? I mean, I have visions of like Yolanda's glass refrigerator. I mean, we don't have to get into it, but any
Yolanda's house was pretty great. That glass refrigerator was something. Kris Jenner has a great glass refrigerator, but Yolanda's was the gold standard. She was the first. And that fridge is definitely on, I think, my list of best things as well. I would absolutely include that. One thing that really bothered me, and maybe you want to insert this somewhere else, Ramona's renovation.
Ooh,
to that Hamptons.
Hamptons? Okay.
I kind of made a little list of like Hall of Shame stuff that I thought was really offensive. And one of the worst things I thought was what she did to that house in the Hamptons, because it wasn't great to start with. It had some weird architecture and weird sort of roof lines. And then she went in, painted everything white, put in a really cheap kitchen, whitewashed wood floors, and everything ended up looking so cheap because not only was there no personality, there was really no quality to speak of. And you could tell it was done on a budget. And I think she bragged about, I didn't use a designer, I picked everything myself. And it's like, it totally looks like it. And I think that is kind of dictionary definition of like why it's good to have an outside person advising you, especially in a home that large. There's value to that home. I think she still owns it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that was rough to watch because I really, it was not well done, that renovation. It was too, there's value to that property. I feel like it doesn't read anymore.
Any other final thoughts?
Please stop, Gizelle.
That's your final thought.
That's a final thought. I mean, just get it together. Hire somebody. Hire us. Find us through Jess. Let us give you some advice.
Well,
clean up your palette. Start over. Let's rethink the strap-on edition. We'll get you fixed up. So
let's give a plug here for your company. If people like genuinely want to like work with you, like how would they go about contacting you?
So the best way to reach us, our company name is Hollymount Design. You can reach us. Our Instagram is at Hollymount Ltd, HOLLYMOUNT Ltd, or through our website, which is hollymountltd.com. You can just fill out an inquiry form on there and send it off to us with what you're looking to with the project, approximate budget, kind of what you're thinking, and we'll be happy to connect with you.
Is there an added fee if they want to talk Housewives with you?
There's a deduction for talking Housewives.
Oh, there's a deduction. Yes. Very good.
Yes, our rate goes down for that. But it always helps if we have things in common.
Guys, you could first of all, Dale, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks so much.
This was great. Everyone, you can follow me, Jess XNYC. That's where I have tons of videos from past interviews and also on YouTube as well. Just search Hot Takes and Deep Dives, my name, and thank you, Dale.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.